resisting the urge to roll his eyes. Why do you ask? Am I getting too tan? Nellie shook her head, a bemused smile on her lips, and Vlad slipped out the door. Henry was standing on the sidewalk across the street, waiting. A bronze-skinned, good-looking kid stood next to him, and Vlad could tell by the similar facial features that they were related. Vlad gave a nod to Henry. Henry beamed and nodded toward the newcomer. Hey, this is my cousin, Joss. Joss smiled but didn't say anything. Oh good, the strong silent type. They trudged toward the school together, following beaten paths between houses, worrying aloud about their impending first day as high schoolers. Vlad's heart was hammering its objections against his ribs, and just as he'd taken enough deep breaths to calm the beating in his chest, he rounded the corner to face the front steps of Bathory High. Bathory High School was quite a source of gossip in the small town of Bathory, as it had once been a Catholic church. The church had been deserted forcefully to the wall. Let him go. Vlad turned his head toward the sidewalk. Jaws had apparently tucked away from Henry's entourage and was looking at Bill and Tom matter-of-factly. His head was tilted slightly and one of his eyebrows was raised, as if he wasn't used to people not doing what he told them to. Apparently, Henry's cousin was funny, but not terribly bright. Vlad wanted to tell Jaws to beat it, but just then Tom rolled his eyes and pushed Vlad harder against the wall. Vlad's spine was lodged against a rather pointy stone. He winced and fought to get away, but Tom had him pinned. You're gonna get it this year, Goth boy. We've got plans for you. I said, let him go. Jaws had sat his back wish his parents had given him a brother. Like Henry, everybody wanted to be near Greg. You'd think that would make him obnoxious, but it didn't. He set the standard for what cool was in Bathory High. Vlad walked under the arch and followed the flow of hesitant freshmen into the gym. The gym looked pretty much like the junior high's gymnasium, but for the large wooden beams lining the ceiling. 3 tables had been set up along one wall. Vlad followed the crowd from one to the next, and when he walked out of the gym, he held a map, a his seat. He wasn't exactly sure why he was avoiding Meredith. It's not like they declared their undying love for each other or something stupid like that. It was just a date, followed by almost but then not a kiss. But ever since then, he felt a huge weight on his shoulders. Guilt. He was almost sure of it. Henry was writing something down in his open notebook. At first, Vlad thought it was a note, perhaps some snide comment on Mrs. Bell, or maybe some crucial info on Meredith. But then he paused with his fingertips on the vampire book and glanced over his shoulder at Vlad. So what do you think? Are vampires real or just some pretend nightmare that people keep writing about? At first, Vlad said nothing. Then, after Joss looked over his collection for several minutes, it became clear that he was really expecting Vlad to answer. Given how many years Vlad had been pretending to be human, his reply came in second nature. As second nature. Nobody believes in vampires, but that book does present some pretty good arguments. His tone turned serious as he met Joss's eyes. Personally, I think that anything is possible. Joss nodded. Vlad opened his bedroom door and gave a quick glance around before inviting Joss in. His room was cluttered with dirty laundry, but Vlad tossed the clothes behind the door and sat on the bed. So where'd you move from anyway? Joss was looking about the room, curiously approving what he saw with a nod. Santa Carla. Before that, I lived in Romania, and before that, New Orleans, Paris, and San Francisco. You move around a lot. A sad glimmer lurked in Joss's eyes. It's my dad's job. I hate it. It'd be nice to stay in one place for a while. Joss shook his head and managed to smile. Hey, have you ever seen what happens when you drop Mentos in diet soda?